It was a nation built on whispers and ruled by fear. In the Soviet Union of the 1930s, even silence could be dangerous. A wrong word at dinner, a joke told too loudly, a pause before clapping when Stalin's name was mentioned. These were not small mistakes. They could be death sentences. Under Joseph Stalin, fear wasn't a symptom of tyranny. It was a tool of government. Every home, every factory, every school had its invisible watchers. The secret police, the NKVD, operated like a shadow army, snatching people from their beds in the dead of night. Families learned to sleep lightly, because when the knock came, it was never by chance. Those who left rarely came back. They vanished into a system so vast and cruel, it would soon swallow millions. A network of prisons and labor camps stretching across 11 time zones. It had one name, the Gulag. But before the Gulag became an empire of suffering, Stalin built something else, a kingdom of fear. He rewrote history books to erase his rivals. He flooded cities with propaganda showing his smiling face beside workers and farmers. Posters called him the father of nations. But behind the portraits, in the corridors of the Kremlin, he trusted no one. Not his generals, not his comrades, not even his closest allies. He believed that enemies lurked in every shadow, and that purging them was the only way to keep control. The result was the Great Terror, a storm of arrests that swept across the Soviet Union between 1936 and 1938. No one was safe. Party officials, factory workers, artists, scientists, soldiers, and peasants. Hundreds of thousands were executed. Millions more were condemned to the Gulag.
Comrades! Our great leader, Comrade Stalin, continues his tireless struggle against traitors and saboteurs who seek to destroy our socialist future.
These were the words that justified the arrests. To question Stalin was treason. To doubt him was suicide. And so, night after night, black cars rolled through quiet streets. Inside them, NKVD agents carried their lists, names written in ink, sealed by paranoia. For those listed, there was no trial, no defense, no appeal, only the journey to nowhere. By the late 1930s, the Gulag had become more than just a prison system. It was a machine, a factory of obedience. Millions would be broken there, body and soul. It was Stalin's masterpiece of control, built on bones, fueled by fear. And for one man, whose story we will follow, it began on a cold January night, when the sound of boots stopped outside his door. Moscow, 1938. Snow falls in heavy silence, blanketing the city in white, but beneath the calm lies terror. It is the hour when no one wants to hear a knock. Because in Stalin's Russia, midnight belongs to the NKVD. Inside a narrow apartment, a man named Alexei Morozov sits at his desk, writing. He's a school teacher, 34 years old, who once believed in the revolution. On his shelf are dusty books by Lenin, Marx, and a framed photograph of Stalin himself. But tonight, his pencil trembles. A rumor has spread through his school. Someone reported that Alexei questioned the grain quotas, a casual comment overheard in the teacher's lounge. And in Stalin's world, words were weapons, even when whispered. Outside, headlights slice through the darkness. A black gas car stops in front of the building. 3 men in long coats step out, their breath forming clouds in the frozen air. They climb the stairs slowly. Every floor they pass goes silent. Doors close, lights go out, then the knock. NKVD, open the door. Alexei's wife, Irina, appears in the hallway. Her hands shake as she clutches her robe. The men push past her, wordless. One reads from a paper. Agent Morozov, Alexei Petrovich, you are under arrest for counter-revolutionary activity and participation in anti-Soviet propaganda. Alexei, voice trembling. There must be a mistake. I'm a teacher. I've done nothing wrong. Agent, you can explain that to the investigator. They search the apartment, pulling out books, letters, photographs, anything that might be used against him. When they find an old journal where Alexei wrote, "The people are hungry. Why do they still praise Stalin?" The agent stops reading and looks up. Agent, this is enough. Irina tries to speak, but another officer silences her with a glance. Alexei is allowed to take one thing, his coat. No luggage, no food, no goodbye. As he's led down the stairs, neighbors peek from behind their doors, their faces pale. No one says a word. They've learned that even compassion can be dangerous. The black car drives away into the night, disappearing into the white fog of winter. This scene repeated itself millions of times. In Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev, Tashkent, the story was the same. Teachers, doctors, soldiers, engineers, anyone could vanish. The NKVD kept daily quotas of arrests. Sometimes the agents themselves didn't know why they were taking someone. It was enough that their name appeared on a list. By dawn, Alexei's name had been typed on a new document. Case number 48,271. Enemy of the people. He was no longer a citizen. He was now a number in Stalin's machine of fear. Within days, he would be put on a train heading east, to a place no one ever spoke of openly. A place colder than punishment, harder than stone. A place that would become his world for years. The Gulag. The train roared through the endless Russian winter, carrying Alexei and hundreds of others. Inside the wooden boxcar, there were no seats, no warmth, no hope. Bodies pressed together like cargo. Humans packed like grain, each one a life reduced to a number. Outside, Siberia stretched endlessly, frozen forests, barren steppes, and rivers choked with ice. Inside, there was a smell of fear, sweat, and human waste. The guards counted them frequently, shouting over the din of the train. A whisper could be deadly. Some passengers tried to comfort the children, sharing scraps of bread, but there was almost nothing to eat. Water came in small, frozen buckets, barely enough to wet parched lips. Alexei looked around. He saw familiar faces, workers, peasants, soldiers, even a former university professor. Some prayed silently, others stared blankly at the walls. He wondered, will I survive this journey? For many, this ride would last days, even weeks. The journey itself was a form of punishment, designed to break the spirit before the Gulag even began. and some never arrived alive. Illness spread quickly in the cold, dark cars. Children and the elderly succumbed first, quietly, without ceremony. When a body fell, it was dragged to the corner, covered by a thin blanket or piece of canvas, and the guards moved on. During the day, the sun barely rose. At night, the temperature dropped below freezing. Frost crept through cracks in the wood. Hands and feet turned purple, then black. Alexei tried to stay awake, rubbing his hands raw, repeating old poems to himself, anything to feel human. And yet, even in the darkness, small acts of defiance survived. A mother whispered stories to her children. A soldier hummed a lullaby. A man shared his thin bread ration. These were tiny sparks of humanity, fragile, fleeting, but alive. But the train was relentless. Mile after mile, station after station, the prisoners were ferried deeper into the frozen east, further from hope, further from family, further from life as they knew it. By the time Alexei arrived, the Siberian landscape was unforgiving. The snow stretched for hundreds of miles, and the air was sharp enough to cut skin. He stepped from the train onto the wooden platform and saw the fences, barbed wire stretching like metal teeth into the sky. Guards with rifles stood silently, waiting. He had arrived. The journey had ended, but the nightmare had only begun. Welcome to the Gulag. Alexei stepped into the camp and was met by a silence heavier than any he had known. Barbed wire fences loomed over him like metal giants, and watchtowers pierced the gray sky. The snow crunched underfoot as guards led him past rows of wooden barracks, each one packed with prisoners who stared silently, their faces hollow, their eyes vacant. Here, names no longer mattered. Numbers were stamped onto arms or sewn into clothing. Alexei Morozov became prisoner 48,271. The first weeks were a brutal awakening. Prisoners were forced to work dawn to dusk, chopping timber, hauling rocks, and digging canals that never seemed to end. The work was endless, the weather merciless. A man could collapse from exhaustion and be dragged into the snow, left to die quietly. Meals were meager, a thin soup, a small piece of bread, barely enough to keep the body alive. Disease spread quickly. Dysentery, frostbite, tuberculosis. The weak perished first, and the guards counted bodies with indifference. Every day was a test of survival. Yet, even here, the human spirit flickered. Prisoners shared stories, songs, and scraps of food. Some secretly taught each other to read or write. These small acts of resistance kept hope alive, tiny flames against the endless darkness. Alexei learned quickly. Speaking out of turn could bring punishment. A single word, a glance, or a delay in labor could earn the lash or worse. Executions were rare but terrifying, a warning for everyone else. He watched men he had once respected as teachers, engineers, or officers reduced to shadows of themselves. Despite the brutality, work continued. The Gulag was not just a prison, it was a factory of the Soviet state. Prisoners built canals, mined coal, cut timber, and laid railroad tracks. Each swing of a pickaxe, each brick laid, fed Stalin's industrial ambitions. The empire grew on human suffering, a monument to cruelty disguised as progress. Alexei's hands bled, his back ached, but he survived. He endured, not because he was strong, but because he had no other choice. In the barracks at night, prisoners huddled together for warmth, sharing what little they had. The walls were thin, the floors frozen, the air damp and heavy. Still, whispered conversations persisted about home, family, and the world beyond the barbed wire. These whispers were dangerous, but also vital. They reminded men and women that they were still human, even in a place designed to erase humanity. The Gulag was not only a prison of bodies, it was a prison of the soul. And Alexei, now prisoner 48,271, was learning to navigate its deadly rules, or perish trying. The Gulag was more than a prison. It was a machine, a vast engine of labor and terror, grinding millions of lives into the foundation of Stalin's empire. Prisoners were sent to extract resources, build canals, and clear forests in the frozen north. Every swing of the pickaxe, every brick laid, every ton of coal hauled, fed the Soviet industrial machine. The work was never-ending, and the death toll was staggering. Take the White Sea-Baltic Canal, for example. Built between 1931 and 1933, it was one of Stalin's great achievements. But the reality was horrifying. Hundreds of thousands of prisoners were forced to dig through frozen rock with bare hands. Food rations were so small that many starved before completing a single canal segment. Tens of thousands died, their bodies thrown into the icy waters or buried in unmarked mass graves. The Gulag was a factory of suffering, stretching across Siberia, Kazakhstan, the Urals, every corner of the Soviet Union. Mining camps, logging camps, railway construction, and prison settlements, each one a node in Stalin's deadly network. The system was meticulously organized. Every camp had quotas: how much timber to cut, how many bricks to lay, how many prisoners to work to exhaustion. If quotas weren't met, punishments were swift and cruel. Beatings, solitary confinement, even execution. Prisoners became tools, stripped of identity, reduced to labor units. Yet Stalin celebrated these achievements publicly. Newspapers called the canals and factories triumphs of socialism. No one saw the corpses behind the headlines, the lives crushed in service to a single man's paranoia. And it wasn't only the physical labor that killed. The Gulag destroyed families, communities, and entire generations. Children grew up without parents. Educated men and women were silenced. Even survivors often emerged broken, haunted, and scarred for life. Stalin's empire expanded, but at an incalculable human cost. Millions of lives, teachers, doctors, soldiers, writers, peasants, were consumed by the machinery of death. The Gulag was not a side effect of Stalin's rule. It was the rule itself. Alexei, now a shadow of the man who had once been a teacher, understood this all too well. Every day was a battle to survive, against the cold, the labor, and the ever-present threat of death. Yet, amidst the brutality, he held on to a single thought. If I survive, the world must know. Years passed. Alexei had survived the Gulag, barely. He left Siberia a broken man, but alive. Around him, the snow-covered land seemed empty, yet it held countless ghosts, the ones who did not return, whose names were erased from lists, from memory, from history. The Gulag stretched across the Soviet Union like a frozen wound, a testament to the depths of Stalin's paranoia and cruelty. It was not just a prison, it was a monument to fear, built brick by brick with human suffering. Stalin ruled with iron and terror, convinced that enemies were everywhere, in offices, homes, schools, and even in the hearts of those who loved him. His purges consumed loyal comrades, his paranoia spread like wildfire, and his policies left millions dead or irreparably scarred. Families were destroyed, entire communities silenced, and the land itself became a witness to cruelty. The Gulag was the engine, the tool, and the weapon of his absolute power. And yet, the world outside often saw only statistics, numbers that cannot convey the depth of suffering. Alexei would never forget the faces he saw in the barracks, the cries in the night, the frostbitten hands and feet of men too weak to work. He remembered the faint sparks of humanity, whispered songs, shared scraps of bread, quiet moments of defiance that kept hope alive, even for a moment. These were the souls Stalin tried to erase, and yet their stories endured. Because while a tyrant can imprison bodies, he cannot fully imprison memory. The Gulag claimed millions, but it also left a warning for generations to come. Absolute power unchecked leads not to glory, but to suffering. And the darkness of a dictator's rule casts shadows that reach far beyond his own time. Alexei survived, but the ghosts of the tundra followed him always. A reminder that Stalin's reign was not just about politics or ideology. It was about terror. It was about control. It was about cruelty. And that, above all, is the dark side of power.